Okay, we're recording. Yeah, so biodiversity, we want diversity in our ecosystems. So you're saying, like, okay, if we had something that was like a certain, you said like weeds, like you have one weed that's like way overpowering the other plants, it could take over. That's true. That wouldn't be exactly, I think, like you're talking about like evolutionary perspective why you want the diversity, but that is true that like you don't want one thing taking over because that would reduce the diversity, right, Artemis? Yeah.
Could it be that, like, if there's a defect in one of them, you wouldn't want it to spread, and if there's, like, diversity, then there's less likelihood that would happen?
Basically, yeah. So, like, the idea would be, let's say there was some sort of toxin, some sort of like pathogen, a virus, a bacteria that breaks out in that population. If everybody has the same genetics, then nobody's going to be able to survive that virus or that bacteria that would knock out that one plant species, right? So if you have diversity, then the population is more stable over time because the more diversity, the more chances there are that some sort of organism could survive whatever the catastrophe is. So it's like basically it's like don't put all your eggs in one basket. Just like, don't put all your eggs in one. Diversify your investments. We want variation in life because that's going to give us a better chance to survive in certain environments. Okay, if that environment changes, somebody can survive that change in the environment. The reason why offspring resemble their parents has to do with like DNA and genetics. Heredity, that's like the actual transmission of traits from one generation to the next. And then genetics is the study of heredity and variation. These two definitions, heredity and genetics, can be easy to sort of mix together, and they're very different. But if you're going to study heredity, you are a geneticist. Nobody is a hereditist, right? People are geneticists. They study heredity. Okay? All right. Let me get my clicker over here. So yeah, they're like, oh, they all look similar, so they must be related. Heredity.
That's crazy.
That's
That's
yeah. So literally, we inherit trait. We even behaviorally, like certain behavioral traits are genetically linked. So even like certain personality traits and stuff can be, something that can be hereditarily passed down. Anyways, I'm trying to go kind of quick. So a lot of this is kind of review for you, pretty simple stuff. How we pass on those traits from one organism to another is through genes. And that's something they didn't always know, right? People knew, like, obviously you're going to look like your parents because, they're your parents, but they didn't really know how exactly the mechanism that got passed down. Well, we know now that it's the genes that make up our DNA is why we're going to resemble our parents. How genes get passed is through what are called the gametes. So the gametes are referring to the sperm for the male and then the eggs for the female. Okay. We talked about how DNA is packaged into chromosomes. By packaged, it's those histone proteins. That's how we package DNA into proteins. You need to know the chromosome number. We have 40. Yeah, Thomas? The reading guide I gave you, are you talking about the one that was on your desk today?
Yeah.
That's for the next chapter. I gave you another one. I gave you the reading guide the day of the test. It's got a big picture on it. If you need another one, I'll put a few on my desk. You want to come up here and grab one? Yeah, I just didn't have time to make the 11 and 12 one, but I wanted to get you that chapter 10 one so you could read before this class. So you need to know how many chromosomes we have. Humans are going to have 46 chromosomes in their somatic cells. Now, there's only 23 unique chromosomes. We have 46 because each sperm and each egg is going to contribute 23 chromosomes. There's only 23 unique chromosomes, 23 different chromosomes with different kinds of genes. And that'll make a little more sense as we go on. Somatic, soma means body, so the somatic cells are your body cells. All your body cells will have 46 chromosomes. And then your gametes, the sperm or the eggs, they're going to be the ones that have 23. We'll talk a lot more about this later on in this unit, but like genes are broken down into, or genes are located at specific positions on the chromosome. We call that their locus or their loci, if you're saying that plural. Okay. There is asexual reproduction. So certain organisms, they just do asexual reproduction. especially like bacteria. They do asexual reproduction, which basically means they just do mitosis. They reproduce by mitosis. So asexual reproduction is just mitosis. And so if you're an organism that reproduce asexually, that would then be a clone. It's a clone because the genetics is identical. We learned in mitosis that when you make a copy of all the DNA, it's not a very good copy if the copy isn't the same, right? If you change the copy from the original, then it's not really a copy, it's just something different, right? So that's why clones are going to be genetically identical when they do mitosis. All right, so then in sexual reproduction, this is where we get unique combinations of genes. So in 10.3, when we go over the details of meiosis, I'm going to show you there's two main ways we create the unique combinations of genes. All right, so that's 10.1. 10.2, they're showing two organisms that reproduce just asexually. So you have the Hydra. Now redwoods are kind of interesting because they can reproduce asexually and sexually. In this case, what's kind of interesting is like if you have a stump, like there's a stump you can kind of see in the middle there. These trees surrounding the stump, they actually came from like just asexually from cells of that stump, just doing like mitosis, and it can recreate an entire new tree. But then within one of these redwoods, they can then do sexual reproduction and make spores and stuff like that. You don't need to worry about like the details of the oh, and that reminds me, in 10.2, the very ending part of 10.2 in your reading guide, when it talks about alternation of generations, you can cross off those questions. That actually isn't something you need to know for this unit. Okay. Whenever we're looking at like what does it look like for an organism to like move from generation to generation, that's the life cycle. So for humans, the life cycle would be like, okay, you have your you make the gametes, the sperm and the egg, they come together through mitosis, you make the bigger organism, that bigger organism makes gametes, and so on. And I'll have a picture showing that to you, but not too complicated of a definition. So I really want to like focus it on this picture. This is where like things get a little more complicated. The karyotype. So a karyotype is a picture of all the DNA in a cell. So looking here, I told you there are 23 different chromosomes. Okay? You get two copies, and if you took your average body cell, your average somatic cell from any part of your body, you're going to have 46 chromosomes. So if you were to go 1, 2, right, you get two copies of each. This is because you have two parents. Like let's say that came from mom, that came from dad. Mom, dad, mom, dad, mom, dad. That's why you have 46. If we just looked at like a sperm or an egg cell, you would only have one of these. Okay? It's important to understand that. Now, I like how a lot of slides just show this, but I'm glad they zoomed in on this because understand like when they took a picture of like when they made this karyotype. They made this karyotype during metaphase of the cell cycle. So before we do metaphase, we had to do S phase. During S phase, we made a copy of all the DNA. So that's why, and it's kind of hard to see here, but that's why there's actually, you'll see like the two sister chromatids here. In other words, if they were to take a karyotype of a cell that was in G1, you wouldn't have the sister chromatids. You would just have, it would just look like this, that, and that. But here, it's harder to see, but here they did it in, it's in metaphase, so you then get the sisters made because you did S phase. Okay. So the sister chromatids, these would be coming, this would be like, let's say mom, that would be dad. These are identical. Sister chromatids are identical. Now the chromosomes from dad and mom, they're not identical, right? Otherwise, that would mean your parents were like, it's not even possible. They'd be like identical twins. Anyways, not possible. But these two chromosomes, they're homologous chromosomes. This is where some of the vocab can get a little tricky. So homologous chromosomes are referring to chromosomes out of the same genes. So homologous chromosomes, same genes. Same gene doesn't mean I'm saying it's the same sequence of letters, right? Doesn't mean like the A, T, C's, and G's making up these two chromosomes are the same. It's just that these genes, maybe like, let's say this gene codes for like hair color, this gene codes for eye color, and so on. It's the same. It's the genes are controlling the same traits. Okay, that's what it means for homologous chromosomes. So homo means same. So that's how you can remember homologous chromosomes. It's the same chromosomes, not same in the sense of sister chromatids, where it's the same A, T, C's, and G's. So sister chromatids, they have the same A, T, C's, and G's, the same nucleotides. Homologous chromosomes, they have the same genes. That needs to be clear to you. Okay? All right. I think that's everything I want to say here. Don't forget about the centromere. There's one on each sister chromatid. Cool. All right, let me make sure I said everything I need to say here. Yeah, homologous, we would say they're a homologous pair. That's the those chromosomes you get from one from mom, one from dad. They are the same length and shape, and that's because they're carrying the same genes. They're controlling the same inherited characteristics. Shorthand for homologous chromosomes is homologs. Just as a little bit shorter to say. All right. And again, 23 pairs. If you have a pair of shoes, there's 2 shoes. So it's 23 times 2, which is 46. All right. Now the chromosome pair 23, the very last chromosome pair, we call those the sex chromosomes. So I forgot to talk about that. So these are the sex chromosomes here. So the sex chromosomes, they determine the sex. So if you are XY, XY will go with male, and XX is female. So essentially, like when it gets down to like determining like what makes a male look like a male, a female look like a female, males, a lot of like the genes that would control male development are on the Y chromosome. Actually, not all of them. They're and we call 1 through 22. These are called the autosomes. So autosomes are all the chromosomes but the sex chromosomes. Anyway, some of the genes that control like what makes somebody develop as a male and develop as a female, they can be coded on the autosomes. It's not completely on the sex chromosomes. So some people don't really like calling those the sex chromosomes. But, anyways, a lot of the genes that would control what makes a male look like a male would come from that Y chromosome. Notice how the Y chromosome is much smaller. That's something that's worth noting. The result of this is like, when a male makes his gametes, he'll give like an X in one sperm and a Y in the other. Males determine if they have males. So like females can't determine like the sex of like the offspring. Only the male can. So it's like you hear that story of like in history class of like was it like one of the queens? The king was like kept like beheading a bunch of queens because they weren't giving a male offspring. And they're like, this woman is ridiculous. She won't give me a male. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. And it's like really it was just he was just making a bunch of like X sperm, not Y sperm. Anyways. Make sure I said everything. Yeah, so first 22 pairs of the autosomes, XX for female, XY for male. All right, cool. And whenever you have 46 chromosomes, we call that diploid. Di means 2. So you have 2 copies of every chromosome. In other words, the haploid, we would say that's N, which is 23 chromosomes. So haploid is when you get the sperm and the eggs. So sperm and eggs have haploid number of chromosomes. They just have 23 chromosomes. So they just have 1 copy of each of these 23 chromosomes. But then when the sperm and the egg unite in fertilization, that would then get you back to the 2N, or the diploid 46 number. I'll keep kind of running through that and showing you slides on that, but just sort of introduction to that idea of haploid, diploid. Okay, and again, those sister chromatids only happen when we have done S phase, when we have copied all the DNA. Okay. So a little more kind of chromosome vocabulary. So looking here, these would be sister chromatids. So this would be a cell that has done S phase. You know that because you have the sister chromatids. If this cell hadn't done S phase, you would only see just this one blue, this one red, this one little blue, this one little red. Now, understand homologous chromosomes. Notice they have two different colors for a reason. They're saying that red came from mom, blue came from dad. So dad gave his, let's say this is chromosome 1, this is chromosome 2, this is chromosome 3. For humans, there would be 23 different chromosome homologous pairs, but they're not showing it because then the slide would be too complicated. Too much going on. So, we okay with this? This idea? Homologous chromosomes, same chromosome numbers. Like say this is this is chromosome that'd be 2. I'm sorry, this is 1. So these would be chromosome 1. This is from dad, mom, mom, dad, mom, dad. All right. And then we would say this cell is diploid. 2N means diploid. Haploid would be if you just had like the sperm and the eggs. So for humans, it would be haploid. The number is 23. Diploid is 46. Okay. And that's what this slide is trying to say here. So if it's like a female's egg, we would say it's unfertilized. So that if it's a female eggs, they only have the X chromosome. That's because females are XX. When they make their eggs, they can only put inside the eggs an X chromosome. Right? Males can be X or Y because when a male makes his sperm, he could either put an X in the sperm or a Y or an X or a Y. And so whenever these sperm are uniting with these eggs in fertilization, either an X could unite with that egg or a Y. So you get a 50-50 chance of getting the female or the male when that baby's going to be born. Okay. So yeah, here we go. This is a picture of like the human life cycle. So this kind of brings it all together. So we will do meiosis. So meiosis is the process where we make the gametes. The gametes are the sperm or the eggs. Those sperm and eggs are haploid. We call it just N, where N in humans is 23. Humans have 23 chromosomes. Other organisms have different numbers of chromosomes. Their N number might be like 34 or like 50 something. Humans is 23. Fertilization is when the sperm will actually be able to like get through into the egg. So then you get back to the diploid number. Di means 2, so you are 2N, which means you have 46 chromosomes. Then mitosis, so then understand this, then when you have that zygote is just like a one-celled embryo. Then by mitosis, that zygote would develop into the baby that would then be the human. And then male or female, they would then do meiosis in their testes for the male, ovaries for the female to make the gametes again. And on it goes. Okay. So yeah, fertilization now. I don't know how much I need to say this for like juniors and seniors, but like 7th graders, this was like, a lot of them would think fertilization meant sex. And like, you can't have fertilization without sex, but like, just because you have sex doesn't mean there's fertilization, right? There has to be an egg present for there to be fertilization. So females don't always have an egg present during sex for the sperm to create, have fertilization and make the baby and stuff. So just want to make that clear. And then again, that fertilized egg, we call that a zygote. And then by mitosis, that's how then that zygote would produce all the cells for the adult. Okay? So all of the somatic cells, they would then be 2N. All right. I think I said everything here. Gametes made by meiosis. Okay, so let's take a little break.